Hey there, you guys. So this is unorthodox. We've got a snow day, kind of. It hasn't started snowing yet, at least at the time of recording. Thought I'd bring you to someplace a little bit more warm, maybe. So I know no one's fooled by the background, but let's get right into it. So as I told you guys last week, our class sessions are much more, I talk a little bit and then I ask a bunch of questions, and it's very much like you guys lead the way. So just kind of a straightforward video with me just speaking, because obviously I'm concerned about power outages and things like that. I didn't want to say, okay, everybody join me online, not knowing what was to come. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter session, but I'm going to keep it short, sweet, direct. And we're going to try not to lose out on any awesome information. Now, a lot of this stuff is probably going to be a little bit of a review, but we're going to repackage it for the college environment, because that's where a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, well, I already know this stuff. I don't need to relearn it. Well, it's not about relearning. It's about repackaging and learning to kind of rebrand it for college level academic writing, because it's different from high school level writing. Okay. So we start off with description. Now, if you remember from what we talked about last week when I introduced the course, we're not writing a descriptive essay at all in this course, right? We're going to be focusing on exemplification and comparison contrast and argumentation. So how does description fit in? All right. So now, if you don't have your textbook with you, I do recommend that you grab it. So pause me, go get your textbook, because I'll be referring to different sections. And I do recommend that you bring your textbook with you to class, each class session, because we'll be engaging with concepts from there. All right. So description from page 147 is telling readers or viewers or listeners, right? This could be any medium, the physical characteristics of a person, place, or thing, right? Or an idea. I'm going to add that in too. Okay, so it focuses, as the book says, on the five senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. So this is essentially describing something you see, something you hear, something you smell, something you can touch, you feel, right? All of these things. It could be something that you feel with your fingers. It could be something that you feel in here. All right, that's all description. Okay, and being able to do that effectively and well is an amazing skill to have, not just at the college level, not just at the high school level, not just at any level of in the academic world, but for, say, you're trying to contact IT for a problem that you're having with your computer, or you're trying to contact customer service because your Wi-Fi went out and you can't figure out what these lights on your router mean, or you're trying to figure out keywords for a Google search, right? You got to figure out, okay, well, how can I describe this issue first and foremost, right? It's all description, okay? So that's where description is key. Now, in writing or video or like podcasting, you also need to describe it for your audience. Now, your audience is anyone who's listening, reading, or speaking with you, okay? So why is that so important? Well, because without having a clear description, how are we supposed to be on the same page as you? All right. Now, when you're using our textbook, okay, I want to take a brief pause here because there's some tools that I want to make sure you have. And I apologize if my hands keep coming in and out of shot. I'm too short for my desk. It's essentially what's happening. I'm standing and I'm still too short. So we have a few things about our textbook that I want to point out, okay, specifically in this section. All right. Now, on this first page, okay, come on now, filter. Don't do that to me. You're, okay. Well, we're not going to do that. It wants to just be at the beach. So if you're looking at your book, and again, if you don't have your book with you, go get it. All right. On page 147, you see right away the first line under what is description, you see description in bold. Okay. That's a signal to you. Now, if you flip to the next page, all right, under understanding objective description, you'll see objective description is in bold. Okay, if you flip to page 150, visuals is in bold. 151, subjective description is in bold. Now, if you guys are not familiar with using maybe hard copy textbooks because you're so used to reading things digitally, that bold is a signal. Okay, it signals two things. The first thing, this word is important. And the second thing, there you can find more information about this in another area. Okay, and what other area is that? Well, that's the glossary. Now, in our textbook, the glossary is at the back. Actually, in most textbooks, the glossary is going to be at the back. Ours starts on page 779, and it goes in alphabetical order and just defines important terms. Okay, so any of those bolded bits of text, there's a definition at the back of the book. All right, and you know if they're giving two spaces for important, like for information, it's important. All right, so we have to know, okay, visuals sometimes will accompany a description to help us understand. But what I will say is in our class, we're not going to use visuals to accompany description, because if you describe something well enough, especially what we will be describing in our exemplification essay, if you describe it well enough, you don't need a visual, okay? You just need to describe it well with your words. And this will make sense as we get to it, all right? But as an example, we have this super cool background here behind me, all right? We'll ignore what just looked like a baby doll arm pop up behind me. I assure you I don't have a baby doll arm back there. But we have this beautiful winding dock made out of what looks like weathered wood that curves and bends toward a light sandy beach with like rock studded, all like throughout the beach, and some maybe clay topped structures nestled in palm trees, right, on a small island, perhaps. The water is crystal clear, light blue. You could see coral beneath the waves, right? So you can describe this with your words. If you closed your eyes, and perhaps I took a little bit longer to come up with that description, you'd be able to see it, okay? Even with that on-the-fly description, okay? You kind of get an idea of what I'm seeing as I'm trying to describe it to you, okay? And that's what you want to do with your words, okay? So the textbook goes into objective description, which is what I just did, okay? Talk about the pier or the dock and the water and the structures, right? Now, subjective description would be kind of what I said about it earlier, right? Talking about the warmth that kind of comes through the image, right? While we're dealing with this really cold weather, right? This warmth and this comfort maybe that we're not experiencing, right? That's more of a subjective description because I'm putting my feelings into it rather than just describing solely what I see, okay? Now, the textbook also goes on to describe that nothing is ever purely objective, okay? We might strive for objectivity, but we don't ever quite get there, okay? Because we're always going to leave something out, right? Some part of our description is going to be missing, okay? For example, I didn't say anything about the beautiful sky in the image behind me. I just didn't, because I was too busy focusing on the sandy beach and the beautiful water, right? Things that I could touch. Probably because my hands are currently freezing. They feel like they're about to fall off. We've got the things that we're most interested in experiencing that tend to come to the foreground, or the things that help us prove the point we're trying to make. Whereas the things that don't necessarily do that don't quite come up. And that is perfectly normal, okay? That happens all the time. Now, that's not to say that you want to ignore important information, but if it's not relevant, and in the case of the textbook, they talk about that man being angry, right? And it's all well and good to say that the man is angry, but that doesn't tell us anything, because the first question we're going to ask is, well, how do you know? Right? And then finally, we kind of get, this idea of like the red face and the, kind of crinkled forehead and all those other facial expressions. But then the textbook says they wouldn't necessarily focus on the size or shape of his nose, right? Because that's irrelevant. That doesn't have anything to do with the anger, because it doesn't. So you wouldn't want to bring that up. Okay. So that's the importance of, choosing the details that you need to incorporate into your description. All right. Now, I don't want to make this, and I never do make our classes specifically content from the textbook, because you read the textbook, okay, and you get that information, and then we move from there. Okay. So that's just kind of, they provide some really good information in this section. So I wanted to kind of put that into kind of more conversational terms to kind of show you how we would use that. Now, to go off of that concept of the angry man, okay, I want you to think about your favorite movie, for example, okay? And I want you to think about why it's your favorite movie, okay? I don't particularly have a favorite movie, but I am currently rewatching the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, okay? Now, I enjoy it. It's not my favorite, but, I enjoy it. I just read the series, so I'm like, let me rewatch the films. Now, if I told you I liked it because it was full of action, that wouldn't do it. Because I could say that, gosh, about so many movies. And if I could take out, I don't know, say the Fellowship of the Ring, we'll use that as the example that I'm using instead of the whole series. If I could swap the Fellowship of the Ring for John Wick, is that a good description? Right? It's action-packed. Or if I could swap the Fellowship of the Ring for Taken. Can you tell I stopped watching movies like 10 years ago? But if I could do that, or even with like a Marvel movie, they're action-packed, right? Don't watch those, but they're action-packed. It's not a good description. You need to give me more. What connects you, right? What do you find actually engaging and interesting? Now, if I said, I like the Fellowship of the Ring because the director and the producers do an amazing job of setting up not only the characters, right? The characters specifically of the hobbits, right? Frodo and Samwise Gamgee and Merry and the rest of them. right, as underdogs, but also heroes. And we see their growth and development through that first movie specifically. You can say that about far fewer films. Okay? And then we can narrow that even further, and we could talk specifically about Frodo. And we could say that Frodo goes from being like a child and then grows into someone who can bear a far greater burden than he ever thought he could in the space of 2 hours. He learns not only about himself, but about the world and about how he can not only manipulate it, engage with it, and make a positive mark on it. All while dealing with terror and fear, and those are two different things. But engaging with bravery and self-honesty. And now we're getting somewhere, because you can't say that about almost any other movie. Okay? That is the kind of description that you want. Now, of course, that is an overarching description about the movie generally. And next week, we'll get into, well, why, right? Why do I feel that way? I could give you examples. And that's what we use to support our description. All right? So I want you to think, and I want you to bring it with you next week. Just a few sentences, maybe six sentences about your favorite movie or your favorite book or your favorite podcast even, and why it's your favorite. But it can't just be because it's funny or because it's interesting or because it's engaging. Nah. Give me something real, something that you can say about very few movies or books or podcasts. Something specific to that one. All right, that's what I want to see from you next week, and we're going to build off that. All right, so now I want to move into, well, actually, let me check and see, make sure I didn't miss anything in this little description section. One quick note that I wanted to make a point about is that in this class, throughout the entirety of the semester, we're going to be focusing on kind of the journalism questions. All right, the who, what, where, when, and why. Okay, and how. Actually, it's kind of, added in sometimes, but that's really important for us. Okay, who, what, where, and when are description questions. Okay, if you were to describe a scene, okay, you would use those particular descriptive questions, right? Who's in the scene? What happens in the scene? When does the scene take place? Right? These are the kinds of things you would ask yourself, and then you would share. The why and the how, those are analysis questions. That's where we get to more subjective details and subjective development, okay? That's where you kind of take a position and develop toward that position. I'm trying to be selective in my language here. That's more persuasive, that's more argumentative, and we will be doing a lot of persuading and a lot of argumentation in this class, all right? But the root of that, choosing evidence, choosing examples, that's where your analysis that helps support your persuasion and your argumentation is based off of. You need those right examples, and you need to describe them in a way that your reader or your listener or your viewer can understand and get behind. Okay? So let's pop up a whiteboard here real quick. So we've got description. Okay, we've got objective, and we have subjective. Okay, important. Okay, we also have specificity. We're going to need that. Okay, and we have that question of visuals. I'm going to put a question mark next to it. And the reason I'm putting that question mark is because we're not going to use them, because your actual language, right, between objective and subjective description is going to be so clear and well developed that we don't need these. Okay? That is what we've just covered in a nutshell. Okay? Let's take a look at our second part of our reading, the challenge of being human in the age of AI. Now, I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question because obviously you guys aren't here to answer that for me. So, how compelling did you find this reading to be? Were you fully behind these authors? Or are you like, wow, AI is a real problem here? Or are you a little more skeptical? Yeah? I'm going to let that float because obviously I can't hear your answers and I'm a little bummed by that. But I would venture to say that maybe those of you who have used AI, who are aware that you've used AI, because we've all used it, okay? Autocomplete words in your phone, spell check, right? These are all AI tools. But those of you who seek out and use artificial intelligence may be a little more skeptical of this, whereas those who have chosen to kind of stay away from artificial intelligence may be a little bit more on board with this argument. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just a supposition. But beyond the overall goal of this essay, which is essentially to convince you that we need some form of moderation in how we use artificial intelligence and some sort of guardrails, which, by the way, was a main concern when the internet came out and became mainstream, and actually kind of still is about the internet. But the way I want to look at it is how this was written. Okay? So, one other little textbook note that I want to give you, and it's a little pro tip. Anytime you see a word that you don't know the definition for, circle it and look it up. Okay? This will hugely increase your vocabulary over time, and it will help you better understand the content of what you're reading in the moment. All right, maybe also, scribble the definition in your book or write it in a document on your phone, right? Just something that will help you understand and remember the word. And then maybe try to use it within the next couple of days. All right. That's just a little pro tip. I find that, writing it down, but then also using the word cements it in here. Okay. So things like words like obviating and novel in this case, maybe even concurrent, right? These words might be unfamiliar to you. If they are, look them up. Okay. Circle them, look them up. All right. But I wanted to point out kind of how this was written in some ways. So if we look at paragraph 5, and you'll see paragraph numbers on the right-hand side. I'm looking on page 220 in our textbook. Now, just a quick note, this essay is in the exemplification section of the textbook. So you'll see how description is used to persuade here, okay? Because our authors here, Kissinger, Schmidt, and Huttenschlager, are, I apologize, my dog, stop. Our authors are trying to describe the scenario of AI, but they're also trying to show that it is something that we need to kind of keep an eye out for, right? So we have in paragraph 5, in 2020, Halocin, a novel antibiotic, was discovered by MIT researchers who instructed AI to compute beyond human capacity, modeling millions of compounds in days, and to explore previously undiscovered and unexplained methods of killing bacteria. So I want to ask it kind of our journalistic questions. Halocin, a novel antibiotic, that's what? And I skipped in 2020, which is when, was discovered by MIT researchers who instructed AI to compute beyond human capacity, what? Modeling millions of compounds in days, and to explore previously undiscovered and unexplained methods of killing bacteria. What? All right, that was all description, okay? We had a when, we had a what, we had a who, we had a what, we had another what. There was actually another what. There was one part of the sentence that had 3 whats in it. And then that was the end of the sentence. Following that breakthrough, the researchers said, okay, following that breakthrough alludes to the previous what, right, the breakthrough. The researchers said that without AI, okay, Halocin would have been prohibitively expensive. Okay, another what? Okay, the researchers obviously are a who. In other words, impossible to discover through traditional experimentation. And traditional experimentation would be how? Okay, so it would have been impossible. The researchers are identifying a how here. Okay, so they're taking it a step further and analyzing the kind of potential cost based on what the AI completed. Okay, so I know that might have been a little bit convoluted, but a whole bunch of when and what and who to come to a how, right? To come to an analysis. And then we'll skip the next paragraph. We'll go to paragraph 7. And we get subjective description to start. The promise of AI is profound. Okay? Subjective description. Translating languages, detecting diseases, combating climate change, or at least modeling climate change better. Right? And these are all potential hows, right? So it's subjective description and then analysis. I'm going to jump to that final sentence of that paragraph 7 and look for that final comma. Okay, just after that last comma of the last sentence. The use of AI for an intended purpose may also have an unintended one. Another subjective description. Uncovering previously imperceptible but potentially vital aspects of reality. Okay. Subjective description also promotes objective description here. Interesting. Okay. And now we're going to get into something. I'm going to use the word interesting again. Okay. We're going to move to paragraph 9. We've got rhetorical questions. If an AI writes the best screenplay of the year, should it win the Oscar? If an AI simulates or conducts the most consequential diplomatic negotiation of the year, should it win the Nobel Peace Prize? Should the human inventors? Can machines be, quote, creative, unquote? Or do their processes require new vocabulary to describe? Lots of rhetorical questions there. Now, there's not a lot of nuts and bolts to kind of, parcel out in these questions, okay? There's not too much emotion in there, but we can dig into the next one because we have a fuller description to work with. You ready? If a child, and this is paragraph 10, if a child with an AI assistant comes to consider it a, quote, friend, unquote, what will become of his relationships with peers or of his social or emotional development? And this is why rhetorical questions can be dicey. Okay, I personally don't recommend that you use rhetorical questions, and for this reason exactly. Okay, this one and one that comes up in the next paragraph. Okay, because this is asking you to assume quite a bit. Okay, one, it's asking you to assume that this child has like no other personal contact at all. Okay, just because this kid becomes friends with an AI assistant means obviously that this kid has no other friends at all. They just will no longer want to have relationships with peers. There's obviously no family involved, okay? And that social or emotional development will somehow go by the wayside. Because how can you develop socially or emotionally if you're friends with something that was created digitally? Okay. What of all the development that happened before? Okay. Is there not knock-on effects from that? Does the fact that they have become friends with an AI assistant mean that there are not still rules enforced by the parents that say that, this child can only be on the computer or the screen for X number of hours per day or X number of minutes per day, right? What kind of suppositions are we making here? Okay, so that's one example of why rhetorical questions are a little dicey. Because if your rhetorical questions can force your reader to ask this level of questions, probably a little too much. Okay, same thing for the next paragraph, paragraph 11. If an AI can care for a nursing home resident, remind her to take her medicine, alert paramedics if she falls, and otherwise keep her company, can her family members visit her less? Should they? If her primary interaction becomes human to machine rather than human to human, what will be the emotional state of the final chapter of her life? Okay, so if someone goes in a nursing home and a nurse aide reminds her to take her medicine, alerts paramedics if she falls, and otherwise keeps her company, do her family members visit her less? Should they visit her less? Do they become her primary interaction? I mean, I guess sometimes, but I don't think that's usually the primary goal, right? I mean, I guess it depends on the family. And that's the problem, right? Again, we're forced to make assumptions here. This is a slippery slope argument. You might read this and go, oh, this poor woman in the nursing home. To jump back to the previous paragraph, this poor child, only friends with a computer? Ah, no. No, no, no. No. Because, okay, remind her to take her medicine, alert paramedics if she falls, otherwise keep her company. This AI could, this could be a cell phone, right? You got the reminder app. You've got the double tap on the button to call 911, keep her company. I mean, this old lady probably scrolls Facebook all day, right? Does that mean that her family members visit her less? Does that mean that they should? Right? We've now given two examples that stand in the place of this AI caring for this nursing home resident, right? An actual person who works for the nursing home and a cell phone. And neither of those mean that this person is getting less care or that their family visits them less. Okay? And we gave many examples for this kid with the AI assistant. Okay? Just like we were talking about with description and describing why you like a movie, right? Or why you like a book or a podcast or whatever. If you can plug and play different movies or podcasts or books, it's not a good description. If you can plug and play different options into a scenario, it's not a good scenario. So if you were reading either of these two paragraphs 10 or 11, and you were like, wow, this is compelling, right? Oh my goodness. Read it again. Read it again. Okay? So we've got that. Okay? Wait, I left myself a note, but I can't read it. Hang on. Yeah. And in paragraph 12, we have one more kind of scenario. And if, in the fog of war, an AI recommends an action that will cause damage or even casualties, should a commander heed it? Don't we already do that? Right? Isn't there always a thought of, okay, what's the rational mind, the emotional mind, right? We've always got that kind of interplay happening. But then you go, okay, and what is the threat to human safety? Right? That's always a safeguard here. Okay? And now some of you, rightly, are saying, wait, that's not always the case. I can list at least 5 examples from the last 10 years that that's not always the case. And you would be right if you said that. And that's why we move down to the end. Okay? To the conclusion of this essay. Okay? Because you're right to push back on that point. We see halfway through paragraph 15, the goal of both efforts, which is either to, expand. Oh, I'll just read the whole paragraph. Another effort ought to expand the consideration of such questions beyond developers and regulators, so the developers of AI and regulators to control AI, to experts in medicine, health, environment, agriculture, business, psychology, philosophy, history, and other fields. The goal of both efforts should be to avoid extreme reactions. Okay, here's where I want us to focus. Either deferring to AI or resisting it, and instead to seek a middle course, shaping AI with human values, including the dignity and moral agency of humans. I think we've seen throughout history that there is no one dignity and moral agency of humans, right? That's dependent on scenario, that's dependent on many, many factors. So to assume there is one dignity and one moral agency. And to assume that AI couldn't be better or worse than that is odd, to say it, bluntly. It's a little short-sighted, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely stuck out to me as I was reading that, especially when you look at who authored this piece. Any of you catch it? The main author of this, Henry Kissinger. The Henry Kissinger. Red Scare Henry Kissinger. All right, so hopefully, based on the discussion of description and on kind of the discussion of how this piece was written, the challenge of being human in the age of AI, we can kind of get an idea not only about how description can and should be wielded, but also about looking forward to then analyzing our descriptions. Okay, how we can leverage objective and subjective descriptions, which we will start doing next week. All right, so don't forget to write out like that little 6-sentence description of your favorite movie. Okay, what is it that makes it your favorite? Okay, that's what I want to see. Give me a description that makes it your favorite. All right, so if you have any questions between now and next week, please send me an email. Don't forget to do the reading for next week. You can find it in lessons, lesson 2, assignments to complete in lesson 2. It's under the subsection readings due by the start of class on 128. And I'm so sorry I couldn't meet with you today. It'd be kind of weird. We'd have to meet on the lawn and it's kind of cold out. But, we got to kind of see each other virtually, kind of. But I will see you next week. I cannot wait. And I look forward to working with you in the coming weeks. See ya.